Call the meeting back to order, please. I need a motion to return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're now back in open session. I need a motion to certify closed session that only the items discussed in closed session were those items in the enabling motion and those items in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Ivers?
Yes.
Ms. Woolsey?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. We have a couple of motions out of closed session. The first ones will be for the student matters. We need a motion on religious exemption for student A.
I move that student A be exempt from Montgomery County Public Schools.
Need a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Ivers?
Yes.
Ms. Woolsey?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. We have a second religious exemption in motion for students A and C. Motion will cover both students.
B and C, you mean?
I'm sorry, B and C. B and C.
I move that students B and C be exempt from Montgomery County Public Schools.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Ivers?
Yes.
Ms. Woolsey?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. We have a third motion, another religious exemptions for students D and E. Need a motion.
I'll also move that students D and E be excused from Montgomery County Public Schools.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Ivers?
Yes.
Ms. Woolsey?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. The next motion out of closed session is related to the superintendent presented to us a list for those. Help me, Mr.
That's going to be later in the meeting, Mr.
Got you. I apologize for that. I thought it was part of our closed session. That concludes all the motions out of closed session. Next item on our agenda is guidelines for public address. This is the public address section where the board sets aside 30 minutes with a maximum of 3 minutes per citizen to address the board on items of educational interest. I would point out that the board does not respond to those who may speak to the board at public address. And at this time, I do not see anyone signed up, so therefore I will open it up to the audience and ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the board at this time. If so, please step forward and state your name and address. Seeing no one, public address is now closed. Next item on our agenda is approval of consent items. We have several items here under consent. We've got the grant proposal. We have a donation. And at this point, we'd like to thank those individuals. There were some anonymous donors to Blacksburg High School for some science, math, and CTE equipment. Another donation to Blacksburg High School for math, science, and CTE equipment. And then a local business wishes to donate to Christiansburg equipment to Christiansburg High School. And we'd like to thank those individuals and businesses for making donations to the school. Anything that anybody wants to pull? Hearing none, items are approved on consent. The next item on the agenda is a personnel report. I seek a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the personnel report as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. The next item on our agenda is the financial reports, and need a motion to pay the bills.
Move we pay the bills.
Need a second.
Second.
Any discussion on the bills? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's reports, recommendations, and announcements. Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The first item this evening is a grant proposal called Water E3G. Virginia Tech has requested $450,000 from the National Science Foundation in order to offer a 6-week summer program that will train regional high school and community college teachers in water research. The hands-on program will give participants an interdisciplinary understanding of water sustainability issues. If funded, the project will train 36 teachers over 3 summers and will include approximately 10 Montgomery County Public School teachers in that number. I recommend this grant this evening for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion, board members?
Yes, I would just like to say that this sounds absolutely fascinating and timely. I remember, as most of you probably do, weekly readers when I was like in the 6th and 7th grade, and they were talking about water and how we need to look at what we're doing with it or not doing with it. And here we are today, those many years later, and, you know, water is becoming an issue, clean water for everyone. So I would like to take this myself.
Is the outcome of this going to be incorporated into other classes like 8th grade science or biology or?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, that's great.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Item B this evening is a request that was made to us by B&B Storage for a stormwater easement to go across the rear portion of the Christiansburg Middle School property. The easement does not create a problem for the school's use of the property and does not impact the landscape. With your approval of this concept, I'd like to move this request forward to the Board of Supervisors for approval and granting of an easement. Although the item this evening is presented for information, I would like to ask you to move it to action so that the work could be done perhaps over the winter break and be no kind of disruption at all to the school campus.
So by doing this, is it going to have any kind of impact on the neighborhoods surrounding this?
No, it does not. It's been looked at fully. There's no environmental impact for either surrounding neighborhoods or for the school. I'd be happy to ask Dan if you'd like to come and address it more specifically. Or we also have in the audience this evening the developer Brian Rice and also John Neal from Gay and Neal.
Can I make a procedural question just real quick? Could we get a motion?
Yeah, I'm just going to do that. I think we need a motion, and I will do that.
You're moving it to action too.
Exactly. I'd like to move this into an action item by making a motion that we accept the easement request at Christiansburg Middle School.
Second.
I need a second.
Second.
Now, discussion. Do it. We have one. Anybody else have any questions? Do we want to hear from, we have some folks in the audience. Do we need any clarification from them? Or are we good with what has been presented by the superintendent?
As long as it's been studied and we're not going to be doing anything that's going to affect anyone else negatively, I'm good.
Okay. Any further discussion?
When is the start date if we approve this?
We would like to try to get it done during the winter break if we can get it on the Board of Supervisors agenda in a timely manner to do so.
Which would be when?
I will advance it to them tomorrow.
Okay, so the plan is to start and finish during the break.
It's my understanding it's about 3 days worth of work.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
I see some heads nodding in the audience. So. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
The next item, C, is a request from Appalachian Power Company for a temporary right-of-way easement at Auburn Middle School to facilitate the relocation of the overhead power lines that currently serve the mobile classrooms. This project will take place upon completion of the new AMS project and in no way adversely affects the school. It's recommended that this agreement recommend approval of this agreement in concept and allow me to move this request also forward to the Board of Supervisors.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The next item is the Virginia e-learning backpack initiative, or the VPSA supplemental grant resolution. You may recall that I spoke with the board some during the summer about the potential that some of our high schools would be eligible to participate in this particular opportunity. Montgomery County Public Schools does have the opportunity to participate in this initiative if the board approves the VSPA resolution for participation. The schools that are eligible for funding, excuse me, the schools that are eligible for funding are the 9th grade class at CHS, EMHS. Excuse me. Yeah, excuse me. Just a minute.
Board members, based on the information that's been presented to you, do you have any questions at this time?
The way I understand it, that this is just giving us the opportunity to participate. We're not committing to any participation, the way Ms. Blackburn explained it to me. So I
And I'm
just
going
want,
to defer to Dr. Graham in the audience in the absence of the superintendent at this point as well. We're just asking to participate.
Participation doesn't mean that we have to do it. We can
Okay.
accept it and then choose later not to.
Okay. Now, the funding's coming from, again,
the state.
state. That's what I thought. Okay, board members, this is as an action. Any other questions at this time on this? Okay, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, there was no motion.
There was, I apologize.
Thank you very much.
You didn't get that far. So we need a motion. Thank you. I'm just trying to get us.
I move that we sign this resolution, when we find, about the e-backpacks.
Second.
Now, discussion, and we've had our discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda.
Excellent. I should leave more often. You all did that very expeditiously. Item E is a request that the board consider approving a panel of potential hearing officers should there be grievances that need to be heard on behalf of Montgomery County Public Schools. And this came about as a result of some changes in the grievance procedure that were approved by the General Assembly in their latest session.
Need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion that's been presented and the recommended hearing officers is listed? There's 4 people listed. Do you have any questions or comments for the superintendent or for our attorney? Do you, Mr. King, do you want to offer anything?
Just very quickly, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the motion be amended to approve the list and direct the administration to assign hearing officers on a case-by-case and rotating basis as the need arises.
So, you made who made the initial motion? You did.
I'd like to amend the motion.
I'm sorry, Ms. Franklin,
I
may
did.
we?
I'd like to amend the motion to include what Mr. King had just said, to approve the 4 individuals on a rotating basis.
Authorizing the superintendent to approve on a
Correct.
rotating basis the four individuals that's been presented to us tonight.
Just by way of explanation, if a grievance comes in, there are very tight timelines.
Right.
And to avoid having to come back and have you approve a hearing officer each time, but to make sure that there's no impropriety, if we just rotate through the list and have the next officer on the list assigned to an individual case.
And we're authorizing the superintendent to do so
On your behalf,
on our
correct?
behalf.
I accept.
Okay, you accept the amendment?
Does it need to be second to the
Yeah, I
amendment?
need a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second to the amendment. And now we need to vote on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment carries. Now we need to vote on the initial motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You've been authorized and the panel has been approved. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is F, self-insurance option for health insurance. At your last meeting, you approved moving to self-insurance as the vehicle for paying for employee benefits. A second step in this process is to determine the feasibility of going into a joint pool for self-insurance with the Board of Supervisors. Again, the presentation is only about how you, as the employer, fund the insurance program. It is not about the actual benefits. Also, the presentation this evening assumes that even if the Board of Supervisors and the school board were to go into a joint pool, the coverage for employees would not have to be changed by either employer. So this evening we have with us, again from McNary, we have Dan Brandon, and I'm going to ask Dan if he would make a brief presentation to you at this time. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. It's good to be here. We were asked to do an impact study on the consolidation of your program, your medical program, with the county's medical program. And let me get through all these pictures. In doing this study, we made some assumptions that there would be no benefit design changes for either program, that Montgomery County Schools has roughly 1,130 employees, and the county has roughly 365 employees, so the schools would have 75% of the group, and the county would have 25% of the group. In doing the study, we would take a look at, and I think you've already had the presentation on self-funding, so under fixed cost, under a self-funding program, that would include the administration fee, the network access fee, and the stop-loss fees, both the specific and the aggregate stop-loss. In taking a look at the makeup of the two groups, the demographics of the county would help reduce the fixed cost because they have a younger group of people on average, and they have a higher male content in their group. So those two demographic, from an underwriting standpoint, those two demographic situations would help lower the cost of the fixed cost, and that would be mainly in the area of the stop-loss premiums. Based on the volume of the employees, you're increasing the total number of employees that would be covered under the group. It would go from your current group of 1,100 to a group of 1,500. So the more people there are, the lower the unit cost would be. As I said earlier, they have a higher male population, and they have a lower average age. Just as a point of interest, their average age on the employee group would be 46, just like yours, but on the members, which would include the dependents to be covered, their average age is 36, where yours is 43.
So the male population, what does that have to do with it?
Well,
They don't go to the doctor when they should.
yeah, the schools have a higher female group in the childbearing years, which drives claims costs up. That's just a statistical, actuarial fact.
So we just get penalized because we have babies, right?
Well, I don't look at it as being penalized.
It sure does to me if I'm going to have to pay more money. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how to respond to that. They're your employees, so. No comment.
It's probably the best comment.
Thank you. Okay, the cost impact, in looking at the most recent 12 months for the county, their claim cost on average or per employee is a little bit higher, approximately 4% higher. If you break it down on a per employee per month basis, the schools are at $520 per employee per month, and the county is at $542 per month. So what this would mean is if you do merge, then your claim costs would go up as a result of the county's claims or historical claims. And what this would mean from a total impact would be that if you were to consolidate, your fixed costs would go down, as we talked about earlier, but your claims costs would go up. And because the county is only 25% of the new group, then we're estimating that that impact would be around 1% increase in the claim cost. Any questions?
So did you look at like the number of employees that we need to manage our health insurance consolidating and that with the cost with this consolidation?
Say that.
Like the county hires their employees with their HR department for health insurance, right? And we have our employees. Would we consolidate that at all in this process?
This conversation today is not about the combination of services between the county and the school board.
Yeah, we just looked at the cost of the two medical programs.
Are these figures you gave us 1130 for Montgomery County Public Schools and 305 for the county? Is that the number of employees who are now under medical?
Covered under the programs, and it was 365 on the county.
I'm sorry, you're right. So that's how many are already covered?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it's interesting, the county is younger, but if we add them to the pool, the costs go up because
Their claims are
their
higher.
claims are higher. They're younger, but their claims are higher.
Yeah.
Well, and it could be that they just had a year where they had some conditions in their group that caused their claim cost to be higher. It rotates or is a volatile situation. You know, your group next year could have 6 cancers and a couple of open heart surgeries, those kind of things,
Or
where
some
your cost would
babies.
be higher. I'm sorry?
Or some babies. I guess those men were having babies
Yes, ma'am.
on the county side. That's what caused it.
Based on your group, you're going to have some babies born.
Got a big problem with that.
So your recommendation, basically, I mean, this was a study, your recommendation is that to combine the two would actually increase the cost.
By 1%, though.
By only 1%,
By only 1%.
which based on your cost currently, that would be in the between $70,000 to $90,000 a year.
Okay.
And that's an estimate. We'd have to do a little more detailed study based on updated claims to give you a more accurate figure.
And how many years did you say you looked over?
We just looked at the most recent 12 months,
Okay.
August of 12 through August of 13.
Okay, I still need to go back to this mail thing. So you're saying this is an industry standard, not just with this company, or if we went self-insured?
As far as the male versus female?
Right.
Yes, that's an actuarial analysis that males, and to make you feel better, males in my age category have higher costs than the females. Does that make you feel any better?
No.
Because we start breaking down in our 50s and 60s. And,
It doesn't make me feel better.
so.
Any further questions?
That's our next step now.
I'll come back to you with the recommendation. I also shared this PowerPoint and the cost estimate differential with Mr. Meadows yesterday afternoon so that they would have the information.
I do have one. Based on your experience working with other counties and school divisions, do you see school divisions and counties merging plans together is that becoming a popular thing to do, or it just really boils down to, is it a true savings? Is it a wash?
Well, it is something that's being evaluated a lot more frequently now, and I have worked with other municipalities and school systems in the past. So it can be done. You know, the fact that what we were evaluating and taking into account is that each plan, each entity would maintain their current benefit level. That makes it easier to do.
Okay.
If you consolidate and try to put you all on one plan design, then that gets a little sticky sometimes.
Okay.
But the way we looked at it and we're asked to look at it, that's a good way to go.
And it's probably a first good step in maybe
Yes.
overall consolidation.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate you being here this evening. Next item is sick leave hybrid plan employees. And, you know, we've been talking quite a bit about how the new VRS hybrid is affecting some of our policies and some of our benefit structures. And again, this evening, I'm asking you to consider potentially changes in benefits for employees who are hired after January 1 and who become members of the new Virginia hybrid retirement plan. Tonight, we're going to be talking about changes to how sick leave is accrued and used, as well as about how the hybrid plan impacts an existing optional employee benefit, which is the sick leave bank. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Joe, and I'd like to first of all take a moment to commend Joe and members of his HR staff who are working very diligently to stay on top of the issues and the implementation of the hybrid plan. I consider the workload associated with the implementation of the VRS hybrid plan as an additional unfunded mandate from the state. And by the end of this school year, I expect that we will have devoted some 600 man-hours to tasks related to implementation and tracking of a second retirement plan. Joe.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. Members of the board, first I'd like to start off by talking about our current policy, just refreshing the board's memory on our current sick leave policy. Currently, our employees have no cap on accrued days. What this means is that when if they finish a year with additional days they didn't take, they roll over to the next year and they accumulate. And there's no cap on that, so they can have as many days as they have accumulated in that pool, if you will. And also, just to remember, they accrue 1 sick day per month of employment. So a teacher gets 10 sick days, if you will, if they work 10 months, and 11 months they get 11 days, and so on. We also have no cap on the amount of transfer days that are allowed to come into Montgomery County schools, so from other Virginia school divisions. So if somebody has 100 days in Roanoke County and they come to Montgomery, we accept all 100 days of sick leave into...
Financial liability for doing so.
Yes, ma'am. There is a financial liability for doing so. Current sick leave policy allows members to be, or employees to be members of a sick leave bank. And that bank allows employees to get an additional 30 days to ones they've used or exhausted. And that approval comes through HR, and there's a process that goes along with that to get that approval. It has to be a catastrophic event to take those days. Any additional days after those 30 days are approved by the sick leave bank committee. So a person could get an additional 60 days of sick time or sick days. This is where the liability comes in.
Only if it's approved by HR and only if it's approved by the committee.
That's correct.
And is it after they've used up all of their annual leave, they're accrued?
Yes, sir.
They have to use that up.
Not annual leave, no, sir. It's their sick leave.
Their sick leave.
Yes, sir. Now, once they've exhausted their sick leave, we've discussed the annual leave before. I don't want to uncan that word at this moment. But the payout also goes with the sick days. So those days that were transferred in, we're going to be liable for when they go to retire or separate from Montgomery County Schools.
I apologize, you have to refresh my memory.
Okay.
Is there a wait period for the sick bank days? Do they have to wait, like, even after they have used up their?
Yes, sir. There's they have to use 5 days of unpaid time prior to being sick bank eligible.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So once they've used all those days, and then the sick bank takes over, okay, and then they're given up to 60 days during their tenure here. So once they've used those 60 days, they don't get another 60 days the next year or 30 days the next year. Okay. Again, it's critical to understand the payout for those days, the unused sick days. It's 25% of per diem rate up to a maximum of $5,000 that we pay out when somebody leaves Montgomery County Schools.
And when we say leave, hired away to another division?
They could, absolutely.
Or
If they're VRS eligible and they leave and they've been here 5 years, they're eligible to have that paid out on leave, once they leave. Now, they won't be able to transfer those days to the other county because
Right.
we've paid those out. But they would be able to get those days paid out. Yes, sir. Now, when we start looking at the hybrid, given the changes of the newly hired employees' benefits starting in January 1st, the administration is recommending some changes to the sick leave policy. These new hired employees, which I'm going to refer to as hybrid employees because they're going to be under the hybrid plan. Prior to providing the board specific recommendations, there's a few facts about the hybrid employees that we're going to give you right now. First of all, that the hybrid employees are not eligible for VRS disability retirement. Okay, that is one of the reasons the VRS mandated that we provide short-term and long-term disability for those employees. That short-term disability policy, after 5 days of an illness, after they've been out of work for 5 days, the employee would be placed on a short-term disability. Those first 5 days can be covered with their sick days, okay? But after 5 days, they go on short-term disability.
And the short-term disability is paid at 100%?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. And we'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
The key here is that no additional days once they're out. If they're out after that 5th day, they go on short-term disability. They're not using any additional sick days. So they could be out for up to 125 days on short-term disability and not use any additional sick leave days. So they've used 5 and they can be out for 125 and still be paid. And now we'll get to that payment chart here in just a moment. One of the things to keep in mind is that the state regulations, in the regulations, they say that employees may accrue up to 90 days. That's their recommendation, is that we allow employees to accrue at least 90 days. And that's under the current policy. After 90 days, they have no recommendation after that in the regulations.
So then it defaults back to our policy?
Yes, sir.
Got it.
Yes, sir. Well, it's always been in our policy, sir, but the issue there is that they're saying that we have to have a minimum, well, they recommend us having a minimum of 90 days, allowing 90-day accrual.
And ours is just unlimited.
Ours is unlimited, yes. A lot of other school divisions, not a lot, there's some school divisions that limit the amount of days they transfer in.
Right.
Yeah. What we're recommending is that given the changes and some of the different plan designs, if you will, for the leave for each employee, we're recommending that we have that maximum of 90 days for those hybrid employees. Anybody hired after January 1, 2014, be allowed to accumulate days, but only up to 90 days. And because, again, they're being covered under a short-term disability policy, they won't use as many days, they won't need as many days to cover those days.
short-term disability, you said was 125 days, correct?
Up to 125 days. After the 125th day, they go on long-term disability.
So why wouldn't the maximum days and the short-term disability days match up?
We just picked the number that's the DOE regulation
Yes, sir.
to
Okay.
recommend. You certainly have flexibility to go higher if you want to.
All right.
The other part that we're recommending is that the hybrid employees not participate in the sick bank. They're going to have the ability to have short and long-term disability, and that's, again, paid for by Montgomery County Schools. So essentially, you'd be paying twice if after that, if they take more than those days that they've accumulated. This is a kind of a tricky point here. The long-term disability and the short-term disability do not start until a year after of employment. We currently offer our current employees that are hired disability, long-term disability from day one of hire. Now, in order to get disability through the VRS, there's certain criteria that they have to go through. But basically, they have long-term disability from the first day of employment through us, and then eventually through the VRS if needed. Hybrid employees will have to wait 1 year before they'll be covered under long-term disability in any of the plans that were available to us. So what we're recommending is that we bridge that gap, that we offer those hybrid employees the long-term disability that we currently do for our current employees for that first year. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing, but it's 24 cents for every $100 of gross income. Roughly, that means about $80 per employee for the year to cover them for long-term disability.
And only the new VRS hybrid employee.
They would be covered for just 1 year. That's correct. All of our other employees are still currently covered at
Correct.
that same price. Just to do a side-by-side comparison of the two plans now, of the hybrid plan and the current sick leave plan, or the proposed hybrid employee sick leave plan. First, the sick leave accrual cap. There's none under the current one. We're recommending that it be 90 days. And again, the sick leave transfer cap, there's no limit in state. But again, if we set our cap at 90 days, or if the board chooses to choose a different number, that's up to the board, but limit it to that amount of days transferred in. This will not be a huge issue until later on as we go down and we get more people involved in the hybrid plan. It is a possibility sooner if somebody chooses to transfer over to the hybrid plan in another county and then comes to us. So they could have an accrual days that come to us that would be more than 90. It is a possibility. Sick leave bank eligible. We current ones are available for that, and then we're proposing that the new hybrid employees not be covered. And here's a side-by-side with long-term disability. Again, the current ones have available VRS disability as well. They have the disability retirement, and they're also covered by us from day one. The proposed hybrid employees will have long-term disability covered from 1 year after service, but it's, again, paid for by the school board. So remember, our recommendation was to bridge that gap as well. Short-term disability, current employees have it available through the sick leave bank and through their accrual. Basically, their accrual, sick leave accrual, is their short-term disability. The hybrid employees will have 5 sick days they'll have to use. And then I've provided you a chart that has the accrual and the time that's needed. If you will, if you have that available, and employees that are less than 12 months are not covered.
Did you hand us a hard copy?
It should be an attached. Yes, ma'am.
The second one.
Second link, okay,
It's a different one.
thank you.
employees that are over a year to 5 years, to just under 5 years, have a workday replacement up to, they get 60% of their salary for up to 125 days. From 5 years to 10 years, or 12 years, they have replacement at 25 days at 100, 25 days at 80%, and 75 at 60%. So they are getting supplemented through short-term disability. And there will be, there are some counties, and I've done a little bit of polling, that are making employees whole. In other words, during that 60%, they could use 0.4 of their sick leave to make them at 100% if they needed to. So that's something that we're looking into as well. Some of the counties are still working through that, and I'll be attending a conference next week and discussing that with several other counties and how they're dealing with that and making people whole that are out for short-term disability. And then sick leave payout, we're proposing that they remain the same for both hybrid employees and for our current employees. Again, these are recommendations that we're bringing to you for your consideration. I'll take any questions that you have at this time.
So if I go out under the hybrid plan, short-term disability income replacement, I don't get any income replacement until I've been with the division how long?
A year.
Okay. And then at 13 months, so after a year to 5 years, I have 60% of my income for 125 days.
That's correct.
Okay.
And you see it gradually goes up.
So, could we choose to eliminate the 12 months waiting period?
For the short-term disability?
Right.
The only way we could do that is to get another policy that would cover that. Now, it's important to understand that employees are covered for workman's compensation, if you will, for the first, if they're hurt at work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing about the long-term disability. If they're hurt at work, they are covered from day one. It's only after the years is when they could be, if you will, injured outside of work and still receive payment or receive salary. Yeah, but there is a year waiting period. Yes, ma'am.
Right.
So on 2014, can I pick either one? Can I pick which plan I want, or is it this automatic?
No, ma'am. No, sir. It is automatic. It's
So when I look through the policy or the comparison, the people who are hired after 2014 benefits are not going to be as rich as those who were hired before?
It depends on how you you view that, because again, as an employee, I don't, if I'm here 2 years, I can use 20 days or up to 50 days, if you will, and be paid at 100%. And then after that, it would fall off.
But what it looks like to me, and I have to think of this, pull this through my brain, but if we've got people who are eligible for the sick bank and they're getting 100% of their pay through the sick bank, but then I've got another employee who was hired after January 1st, 2014, who doesn't have the sick bank available to them, and they go out on sick leave, they're not getting 100% of their pay.
That's correct.
So we're not equal.
The only way we could be equal, well, equal's not fair, fair is not equal all the time, but here's the thing is that we are going to be investigating whether we do want to make them whole. In other words, we could charge them an additional 0.4 days, 0.4 sick days for those days that they're out to make them whole at 100%. That's something the board would need to decide whether they wanted to do. for the maximum amount of days.
But all we're doing there is just allowing them to replace their income that they're not getting. Whereas, again, the people who have the sick bank available to them are getting their income and not having to, and are not going to use their .4 days.
That is correct.
But they don't use sick leave bank, though, until they've used all their sick leave.
That's correct.
So they wouldn't have any sick leave that they weren't using because they're required to exhaust their sick leave and do 5 days unpaid leave before they go on sick bank.
Right. But it's the replacement of income that is what concerns me. I mean, there's going to be some, obviously long-term illness or some catastrophic issues that, push this to the max. But my real concern is that we've now got a situation in which we have an employee group, and one has a benefit package that is obviously better than the other.
Yes, sir. And again, it depends on how you view that, because right now, if I were an employee and I wanted short-term disability, I have to purchase it by myself. And coming in after January, the school board's paying for it.
Right.
So it creates a dual structure of benefits.
Yes, ma'am.
It would be
That or unequal.
they're different.
That's a different way of saying it. I'm going to say they're unequal.
Yeah.
So,
They're unequal and they're different.
so I'm hired after January as a custodian, and I'm on the hybrid plan.
Yes, sir.
And I'm 3 months into that plan, and my son breaks his leg. Am I covered?
Your son?
Yeah.
No, sir. No, sir. Current employees under the policy are only allowed 4 days for family members to take for family member illness. Current policy.
Leave.
Pardon?
Only
Sick
that-
leave.
Paid
only that-
leave.
Sick leave, right.
But if I'm a employee now, and January 15th, my son breaks his leg, he's covered.
No, sir. The employee can only take, okay, the short-term disability is for the employees, not their families. Okay.
I'm talking about my family.
Yes, sir. If they're ill,
Yeah.
I, as an employee, can take 4 days regardless of when I was hired. The current policy only allows 4 days for family illness.
Okay, I'm just talking about medical bills.
Okay. Yeah, that's under the health insurance. That's not connected with the short-term disability.
Okay. So I'm putting more into this than there really is. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to have employees who for a whole year could be going through some terrible medical issues and have no income.
No insurance, right?
It is quite possible,
No income,
but
yeah.
the current structure is also that. That doesn't change with the current structure. The current structure wouldn't allow that either. If they didn't transfer in days, they came in as a brand-new employee, something happened, a lot of those folks aren't covered either.
Except for what they earned at the 10 days
Or in
they
the 10
earned.
days that they earned.
And if they joined the sick leave bank, which is an employee option.
That is correct, but there is a waiting period for that as well, and I don't recall what the waiting period is for that.
So it's not 5 days.
No, sir. No, sir. This is,
In our legislative meeting,
I-
I might come on about this to our.
I will say this, that every HR director that I've spoken to, they're going through the same turmoil that we are here, of trying to figure out how to balance these two different, very, very different plans for our employees, with trying to make things as equitable as possible.
Yeah, I don't see them as being equitable now.
Right.
I can tell you that, and that's a real problem for me personally,
Yes, sir.
whether the state's mandated or not. Well, right, I mean, I know that the state has mandated it, and when we meet with our legislators next week, I might bring this up, but it placed us in a very, you and your folks in a very difficult situation, but as a division trying to offer appropriate benefits for people when they're sick, or when they have a catastrophic injury, or when they have a catastrophic illness, then on top of that, they have nothing to fall back on from what it looks like here.
The other thing is that this does parallel the Family Medical Leave Act as well, because that's one of the things you have to remember is that they're not protected, if you will, until their first year of employment is complete with Montgomery County Schools.
Right.
So they're not even protected with the federal law up to a year.
Which is still unpaid leave.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further questions?
No.
Well, we'll get the beating up.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you.
So I would just like to add a couple of things to what Joe said, because, you know, what we're looking for really from the board is some direction, because if to implement this policy, we have to bring back policy amendments specific to the hybrid plan. And since we could have employees as early as January 1, 2014, who need hybrid VRS, we're looking at needing to bring you back some preliminary policy at the 17th board meeting, and then action policy at your January 7th meeting, the second reading of policy. So if you could, I'm hearing you say you would like for us to fill the gaps where it's possible, and also you got to consider the economy of doing so as well, and as well as attracting and retaining the high-quality employees that we want, but you have a finite amount of dollars to do so. And so I'm trying to find some, you know, what are the real priorities for you? Bridging the 1 year, bridging the difference in the 60 and the 40, you know, the 60%, 40%, so we can bring you back something that you might actually consider approving.
If I could, Ms. Blackburn, the 60-40 issue can wait, if you will, until we do a little bit more study, because employees that are hired January 1 will not have the availability because of the wait period until January 1, 2015 for those types of benefits anyway. So there is some time to bridge that gap, but yes, ma'am, we're definitely looking for direction.
Why are the hybrid plan people not eligible for the sick bank again? Why?
It's not that they're not eligible. We're recommending that they
Why
not.
are we recommending that they not be eligible?
Because they don't have to use all their sick leave. They take 5 days of sick leave, and then they go on short-term disability. Whereas I take all the sick leave that I have. If it's 100 days, I take it all, and then I can go to the sick leave bank. And there is no 60-40 or anything like that. So after a year, they have this 5 days is all they ever use at one time of their sick leave.
They could be out for up to 125 days and only use 5 days of sick leave.
Well, my
But
feeling
they're
is,
out 125 days at a reduced percentage, right?
Yes, sir.
That's,
Whereas the people in the sick bank could be out 125 days at full pay.
Yes, sir.
See, the disparity here in the pay is what I'm gonna have a problem with.
well, that's where you have the option of the, you know, bridging the gap. Once the employee moves from the 5 days of earned sick leave to short-term disability, where they're getting 60% of their pay, you would have the option to say they can use 0.4 of a sick leave day that they've earned to fill that void, and they'd get 100%.
But again, that's only just recovering their income and taking away a benefit, whereas the other folks still over in the old plan are not having to do that.
I didn't make the hybrid plan though, so I can't undo that. I gotta try to bring us into compliance. How many members do we have in the sick leave bank in Montgomery County Public Schools?
I don't have that information right now. I could get that for you.
It's not a very large number as
It's a large
percentage.
percentage of our folks, yes.
It's a large percentage of our folks, because it's a good benefit.
Well,
Even though
maybe-
there's some discussion about eliminating it from what I read, there's still a good benefit to have.
So maybe your direction to us is to try to come up with a design for a different kind of sick leave bank for a hybrid employee. Because I don't think you could put them straight into the regular sick leave bank. If you're saying you want us to try to find a comparable option, then we can research that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
And I
But
think
it is
that's probably
different.
what we're doing. I think we've got to protect the employees. We really do. And,
gotta
and
follow
and this
the
is,
state law to
this
do
is not
that.
doing it. So maybe there's another option that you,
I'm investigating as many as I can and looking at different school divisions. A lot of them either have gone to this type of approach or they've eliminated it altogether and put everybody in a PTO, which is a planned time off type of format, which I don't think the board would like either, because it is more restrictive.
yeah.
So we certainly have obvious evidence this evening why we are going to spend 600 unfunded man-hours on this before the end of the school year. It's very complex.
Okay, so if we do the bridge, which means the employees would get 100% of their pay, right? Where's the gap? Where is it? Where's the gap where they're not getting the same amount of pay that an employee with the sick leave bank would be getting?
They would lose that part of their paid day as a benefit, because it would bridge the gap.
Okay, so if I have 5 sick days, right? And I was on short-term disability, I would have to use part of that 5 days to bridge it, right?
Yes.
That's correct.
To make it the 100%. Well, one of the things I think we need to remember is all employees have the opportunity to go into that sick leave bank where they would be getting 100% of their pay. And if they choose not to do that, then that's what they choose not to do. But if we have brand new employees who haven't had an opportunity to, accrue anything so that they could be a part of the sick leave bank, that's where there's a problem, right?
That's what I'm hearing. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
That's where the problem is. Right, and prior to January 1st, 2014, you have an option to participate in the sick leave bank or not. But after 2014, there is no option.
Well, that's what
We're saying no.
That's what we're proposing, because we're paying for a short-term disability policy for those employees
At 60%.
for the first 5 years. Yes.
Not 100% like you were beforehand. So,
But that's because the state says this is what you're going to do now.
right. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure this out.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Um,
The other thing, and I don't want to muddy the water, it is something that reoccurs, though, with the sick leave, short-term disability. Once you use your sick bank days, they're done. You can't use them ever again. The sick leave, the short-term sick leave policy or disability policy that we have, there's a 45-day wait period after you've had a short-term disability. Then you can have another short-term disability policy and be out another 125 days. Okay, so this is something that reoccurs that they keep with them. Once they've used it, it's not gone. It stays with them their entire career. They can use this several different years that they're with us.
No, that's a good point.
So you lose in some areas, but you gain in others, so it's an
Exactly.
offset, which happens quite
Well,
often.
It's not, yeah, it's somewhat of an offset, but from an actual take-home pay standpoint, it's not all, you still don't recover your take-home pay.
Well, it's,
Well, it just goes back to what the governor did when he funded SOQ. And that was only what the state says you have, what you're allowed to have. And if you have more than that, and if you have other employees in the district, they didn't get that 2% raise, you had to make that up
Yeah.
yourselves. So we're basically in that same kind of predicament, you know. My employer, I only get a portion of my pay if I'm out sick. You know, I don't get 100% of my pay. So, you know, that's the situation in lots of places. Other
I
places
get
are
nothing.
not. Are not.
Nothing.
Well,
So I understand trying to make sure everybody's being taken care of, and we did that at one time, and now the state has said, no, you can't do that anymore. And how long can we constantly make up the difference? Even though health insurance is one of the big draws for the district because it's paid at 100%. And then when you have a benefit like this where you're not going to get paid except for a portion of it, you know, we just get jammed up repeatedly by the state.
do you have direction from this board? Do you feel like you've gotten some,
I'll figure it out.
And you're,
based on the discussion?
you're really good.
I'll bring you something. How about that? And we can problem solve it.
That's the reason I asked the question.
Thanks, Joe.
Yes, sir.
So we'll hear more about that.
I'm sure we will.
Next item is some new course approvals, and we've presented two for you this evening. One is Technology of Robotics Design, the other is Manufacturing Systems 1. And the third one is Math 12 Capstone. I'm recommending these this evening for information.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Good-looking classes.
Yeah, I like these.
Yeah.
All three of them work together, actually. So, very good.
We'll
Next
bring
item.
that back next time for your action. Next item is your 2014 legislative priorities, and I, gave you a marked up copy in your board update that showed exactly what changes I had made. I added the number of positions that Montgomery County Public Schools funds above the SOQ formula, which is 123.56. I added a request to remove the Standards of Quality Support position cap, and that was done several years ago as a cost savings measure, and it's become what was supposed to be temporary has become permanent, and you're paying for those positions that are no longer SOQ funded. Added a request since the State Board of Ed went ahead and approved the AF grading. I added one suggesting that implementation date be delayed. It's currently planned for implementation in the fall of 2014. I added a list of unfunded mandates. It came from two sources. It came from information that had been compiled by VSBA in 2011, and then also added some of the things that had come out of the legislature in the last 2 years, 12 and 13. I deleted the 65% solution because I was trying to be concise, and it doesn't seem that that's a real big issue right at the moment. And I added something about the composite index to try to meet what Mr. Jones was looking for. So they're presented this evening, hopefully for your action.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Now open for discussion. And these are we are meeting next Tuesday?
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning with two of our legislators to go over this list and present this to them and discuss it as they prepare for the next session. We invited a total of 4 legislators, 4 or 5?
I believe it's 6.
6? We invited a total of 6 and 2 responded, okay.
Do we have
Here.
the unfunded mandates, do we have any idea how many teachers that would be?
123, the unfunded SOQ positions.
Exactly. Exactly.
Katie, do you know what all is in that 123? It's some support positions and teachers. So I can't give you an exact teacher number off the top of my head.
It would just be nice to be able to present that to the
Can you figure it out, Katie?
legislators.
Katie,
I don't need it now, it just would be nice to have that so that they know that the unfunded mandates are just tearing us a new one.
Any other questions on the unfunded mandates on the motion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Legislative parties are approved. Thank you, board members.
Next item is Amendment 5 to the comprehensive agreement. It's presented this evening for your information. It is primarily an accounting shift, and it made no changes in the agreement itself. It was reviewed by Mr. King and his office and considered appropriate for the superintendent to sign. So I've attached a copy for the board's review, and information requires no additional action on your part.
Okay?
And that brings us to VSBA conference reports. Mr. Jones?
Several of us attended the VSBA conference last week. Again, it was a good conference with a lot of information. I just wanted to point out, I think one of the things I'm going to ask the board is that there's going to be a new superintendent's evaluation workshop, and there's a couple of sessions that are going to be scheduled here in January, February, March, and would like to, I think myself and maybe one other board member, probably a good idea to attend that. It's in Charlottesville. It's a half a day with an opportunity to spend additional time with them up to, I think, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I definitely wanted to bring that out. School security and safety was a major issue. Went to a couple of presentations related to that. A lot of good information was presented. I did come up with a school safety checklist. The state has gotten involved in a lot of the safety issues based on what is happening out in the public. So I've got some information related to safety. Again, I went to a couple of presentations on teacher and principal evaluation. In Spotsylvania County, they do everything online. They use Google Docs as part of their online process. And you can actually, I've got some public Google Docs set up so you could go and look at some examples of how they're doing their principal teacher evaluations. And then I went to another seminar basically on the people who have read the new legislation on the superintendent's evaluation and have put together some guidelines and talked about what we shall do and what we could possibly do, kind of boiled it down into some nice layman's terms. And that was about it. Let's see, Ms. Franklin, I believe that you went to a conference as well.
Yep.
Defer the floor to you.
Okay. I agree with you, some good information. For many years, the conference was really bland, and they have really stepped things up, and I was glad of that. I went to a workshop on STEM, and it was very, very interesting. I actually went to the same workshop 2 years ago, and unless you were an engineer, it went right over your head. This broke things down very systematically, helped me understand the difference between an engineer and a scientist, and how we actually may be teaching our math courses in reverse. Instead of biology, chemistry, and physics, we need to reverse them. And it was just very, very interesting, and I'm sure our math teachers will know exactly what I'm talking about, and I can pass on this information. But it was It was just fascinating. And I believe if this gentleman was to speak to our children, they would have a very good interest in science and math and understanding that they could do it and how it relates to their everyday life. And being an engineer would probably be pretty cool. What do you think, Sarah? Right. So, I went to a workshop also with the Charlottesville school system. They have a program called M Summer Academy, and this is an awards-winning program, and it's dealing with young African American males and mostly 5th, 6th grade through middle school, and it's dealing with math. And they have a science academy that lasts 2 weeks during the summer, but the school system is involved with this too. And they also have a group called 100 Black Men of America who mentor these young men. And the numbers is just unbelievable how these young men are able to achieve with giving the right tools and that high standard of achievement that is required, placing them in upper level classes so that they can achieve. But one of the aha things for me was they grouped these young men in the classroom when they got back into school. Instead of having one African American male in this class and another one over here, they grouped them so that they had support, so that they were, learning with each other and not just kind of, okay, I'm in here by myself alone again. And the program was just fascinating. And the presenter, Dr. Benjamin Harrison, was just phenomenal. And we should bring him in to have him talk to our teachers about how they can relate to African American young men. It was just wonderful. The Friday morning general session, Dr. I think it's James Johnson, came and he spoke about the demographical trends for the first decade of the new millennium, and it's the South rises again. And he talked about the browning of America, marrying it out, marrying in, the silver tidal wave, that's some of us, that silver tidal wave, and the end of men, and how women are becoming more and more, let's say, we're taking it over, okay? It's about time. And how the grandparents are raising their grandchildren now, and what that looks like, and how that goes on. Again, any one of these 3 gentlemen who did these workshops to come in and talk with folks in our district to help them understand, especially Dr. Johnson, his way of helping folks understand, if we don't get serious about educating all of our children, then as a country, we're going to be in big trouble because we are getting brown in America. And if we don't think we need to invest in all of our children to make sure that they're supporting the economy of the United States, we're going to be in big trouble. He specifically talked about the Social Security system, and we all know how that's working, and as many folks are not paying into it as they used to, and that was just one piece of it. So we have got to make sure we're looking at what we're doing as education as a whole. So I will pass this information on to the superintendent, and with some of our professional development, maybe we can bring these guys in because they were absolutely down to earth, helping folks understand this is how we do it and be successful and help children be successful.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Ms. Bond, I believe I'll defer the floor to you.
All right. Well, we started off the day, 3 of us, with hearing the 3 o'clock band from, KIPS. They were great.
Yeah.
And being in my profession, I know what, and of course I enjoy it too, but networking and meet and greet. So I always like to take the time to go to the exhibitors because, especially with the schools that we've built and things like that, people like recognition. They like to see that you recognize who you've been working with. So I went to every booth that's out there. And of course, it's always cool to see what they've got and this and that. But, it's amazing how many people say, oh, you're from Montgomery County and you're this and you're that. And they really enjoy that meet and greet kind of thing. So I enjoy doing that as well. Plus, there was a gentleman set up, and he was from the Tidewater Public Broadcast System. And our public broadcast system is not owned by the education system, but theirs is. And they have a free library that anybody can access. Plus, they send people that educate you on how to use the tools they have for free. So I thought that was really cool, and I had a card, but I've misplaced it somewhere. But anyway, and also attended my first regional meeting since we have our regional president with us now. That was really interesting for me. So I did some different things. And the next day I hit the workshops. I went to 2. I went to 1, and it wasn't as good as the STEM one that Ms. Franklin went to, so I kind of cut out. And went to a different one. I snuck out the back door. One of the ones that I went to was called Creating a Culture of Innovation Through the Words of Stephen Jobs. I never know how to say his last word, which was really neat. And they were talking about little simple things that you can do for teachers, like public recognition at boards meetings. A lot of simple things sometimes lead up to the big picture. And like I said, sometimes people just like to be recognized by saying, hey, I know what you're doing. And you're doing something good. And it doesn't have to be, giving money or something that costs. It's just something simple by saying, I see you. And I thought that was really neat. And of course, they, talked about and touched on empowering the student and encouraging students and teachers to take risks. We're, so driven by success now that we're afraid to step back and have a failure. And they were saying, that it's okay. I mean, you don't want continuous failure, but if you don't ever take risk, then you sometimes don't go further. So I thought that was kind of cool too. And they were talking about trust was definitely a big issue. One of the other ones that I went to was called Preparing All Students for College, Career, and Citizenship. And that's something we talk about a lot. And being a business owner, they were talking about how and we talk about business partnerships, but as my line of work, which is most career and technical education, you're so busy working, making a living, a lot of times you don't have time. And in my line of work, along with career and technical education, there are no paid days, there are no paid holidays, there are no work sick days, there's no nothing. So you can't hardly take time to leave to go and work with these students that need this job shadowing, because you can't afford to really take off to lose your own pay. So I found it interesting. Some of the things they were talking about was, doing breakfasts, maybe before work, before, or in the morning. I thought that was kind of neat. And doing job shadowing, which we know all those things are important. And one of the things they were saying is to help students understand why they were in school. And I find having students just graduated and in school now, sometimes that's kids constantly say, what do I need that for? And that's something I think we've got to deal with, is how do you reach that student on their mindset? We can't continuously talk about what we think is best, because they're not going to get it. We've got to touch base on where they're at and what they're thinking. They might not always have the right decisions, and we help them with that, but they're, help them understand why they need that. And one of the things they were talking about is, GPAs, and they were, they posted 3.0 all over their school as something for all students to see that was a reachable goal. And a couple of the phrases they came out with that I thought were really interesting is, smart is something you become, not something you are. And I hear students say that all the time. Well, I'm not smart. I'm just not smart. Well, you're not always smart. You become it. And another one is, success isn't something that is fixed, but can be obtained. And I thought that was another really neat statement that they were using. And one gentleman that was in one of the seminars, or this certain seminar I went to, they asked him, and he said that in their system, they spoke with a few students and said, if you could build the school of your dreams of what you would want and what would engage you to want to be there and want to learn, what would it be? And it was a career and technical education center. And that tells us that's what students really are interested in. I'm not saying that that's the whole line, but we know that that's something they want to do, and if that will help them be engaged, you know, they were saying that that was where the students at. So anyway,
That's it?
that's it.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate your all's attendance. And we also had one of our newest board members attend, and we'll get that report as well. If I can get back to my screen here. There we go. That takes us to the calendar of...
I went to.
Oh, you did.
Yes, I actually attended.
My apologies.
I attended the general session, the VSBA General Assembly update, went to a presentation about a unique design for a new middle school in Frederick County, and also went to the annual meeting of VAS at VSBA. Some of the things that I brought back and have already been able to use are the information that I got from the General Assembly update that I used to make the modifications to your legislative platform that you approved this evening, your legislative priorities. Also got a lot of information about items to watch in the upcoming legislative arena, and some of those that we need to keep on the front burner and watch very closely are what's going to happen with the huge conversation about student assessments and growth measures, what's going to happen with the A through F grading scale as the rules were passed by the State Board of Ed, and there's quite a push by many to try to delay that implementation. What's going to happen to the state operation of schools through their OEI, the VHS sports bill, tuition tax credits and vouchers are out there alive and well, and the movement to attract and retain the best teachers and administrators in Virginia, and what can Virginia do? What does the Virginia legislature need to do to provide the funds to allow us to have the compensation plans that will support our getting the best and the brightest? All of these are things that I've been able to use already, and one that I'm watching very closely is the cost of VRS. Estimates are that you may be asked to increase your employer contribution by 3% this year, and if we have to increase that by 3%, it's going to take a pretty big chunk out of any new money that you might possibly have. So I have lots of things on my mind when we meet with our legislative delegation next Tuesday morning. Conference was very well done, and sorry I missed the KIPS kids, but I was really, really pleased that we had some greatly talented Montgomery County Public School students there to be seen and heard by all who were in attendance.
Sorry, didn't mean to overlook you.
That's okay.
Next item is the calendar of activities that you have before you board members. Next item of business is unfinished business. Does any board member have any unfinished business to bring before the board at this time? Hearing none, the next item is new business by school board members. Does anyone have any new business they would like to bring to the board at this time? Hearing none, the next item is information and announcements. Does any school board member have any announcements or information you'd like to share? Hearing none, we'll move upcoming school board meeting. Next Tuesday, December the 10th, we have a breakfast with our legislators. And then on the same day in the evening, we have a joint meeting with our Board of Supervisors. And this is on December the 10th. Our next board meeting is on December the 17th. And you see the agenda for that meeting. Next item on the agenda is adjournment, and seek a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're now adjourned. Thank you, board members.